I want to also jump back to Zechariah, to the section of Zechariah that gets into the woman in the basket, chapter 5, because we're going to go over to Revelation. It seems like I'm moving around, but what I'm talking about here is the mystery of Babylon, a restoration of the people of Israel, the spiritual church, the real church, the remnant of God in our time. Dual with that is God's purpose to bring the truth and to bring Yeshua Jesus back into the hearts and affection of the literal Jewish nation. In Zechariah 5, we're going to learn something about the wickedness that is over the world, and we're going to go to Revelation and discuss the mystery of Babylon. This is called the woman in the basket. Zechariah's just received the flying scroll. He has just received the word of God, and now he's speaking forth. And it says in verse 5, Then the angel who talked with me came out and said to me, Lift your eyes now and see what this is that goes forth. And I asked, What is it? And he said, It is a basket that is going forth. He also said, This is their resemblance throughout the earth. Here is a lead disc lifted up, and this is a woman sitting inside of the basket. What does this basket represent? As we talked about yesterday, it's woe to Babylon. Who laments when Babylon falls? Is it not commerce, the merchants of the world? Then he said, This is wickedness. And he thrust her down into the basket and threw the lead cover over its mouth. It wants to talk. It wants to speak. It wants to deceive. Then I raised my eyes and looked, and there were 2 women coming with the wind in their wings. For they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the basket between the earth and heaven. So this basket of wickedness with a speaking voice is lifted up between earth and heaven. What does that represent? So I said to the angel who talked with me, Where are they carrying the basket? And he said to me, To build a house for it in the land of Shinar. Remember I said yesterday that there is going to be a literal rebuilding of Babylon. If you know, Saddam Hussein was literally redoing Nebuchadnezzar's palace. If you don't think that us being in Iraq is just some casual chance occurrence, you're crazy. We're in Iraq because that's spiritual and literal Babylon. We care about Iraq because we're under the rulership of Babylon, economically and spiritually and governmentally. And so he's lifting this basket up and he's carrying it to the land of Shinar. When it is ready, the basket will be set there on its base. So, has Babylon been rebuilt? Have we come to see its glory and its power to rule the world economy? No, but we're going to see it. And there's going to be a joining in with the other 2 cities that are going to take great power and connection with Babylon. I'm going to speak about that at another time, but Rome, I believe Rome, Jerusalem, and Babylon play the role of all the end time events. So we see that in Zechariah. Now, let's go to Revelation chapter 12, talking about the male child. Verse 5, it says, And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron. When has Jesus Christ ruled the nations with a rod of iron? Psalm 2 talks about this. It's a foreshadowing. It's a foretelling of the work of Messiah. He will rule the nations with a rod of iron. Real nations. Nations would be human nations where we live. United States, England, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Russia. These are nations. And the Lord is going to rule them with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Now, who does that represent? Who is the child of this woman? Was it Jesus? It has to be. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Then the woman, who does that represent? the nation of Israel, fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared by God. Just like Paul, when he was saved miraculously by Jesus, persecuting Jesus, Paul is taken into the wilderness where he discovers Jesus. And here, Israel is taken into the wilderness where she had a place prepared for her by God. When we were led to Pilot Mountain, when I walked the fields of our 21 acres, rolling hills, it blew me away just to say God put me in such a pretty place. And the Lord gave me dwell in the land and feed on my faithfulness. Delight yourself in me, and I will give you desire of your heart. Then you go to John 14, and the Lord gave me, I go to prepare a place for you. We've always made that to be in my house of many mansions, and it's all about heaven. But I believe there are booths and places for God's people today. I want you to pray over this as I speak it forth. I believe there are special places where God is going to work very intimately and powerfully with communities of his people, just like Goshen in Egypt. And God is raising up Goshens around the world, cities of refuge. And if you don't believe it, then that's okay. I don't care. You will have to deal with the world that is to come. And it would be nice to know that there's a refuge for you to run when your world goes crazy. And rather than getting all upset about that, I leave it to your choice. Now listen here. When the woman fled into the wilderness, there she had a place prepared by God, and there she would be nourished for 1,260 days. Now, some people interpret this as 1,200 years and 60. And they tie that to the Catholic domination of people and persecuting 50 to 100 million, killing 50 to 100 million Christians. We can take that as an interpretation. But I believe that this is at a time that has yet to occur, because you can say days. For Ezekiel to lay on his side 40 days was 40 days, but it represented 40 years of sin. So those 40 days for Ezekiel were real 40 days, but they represented the sins of 40 years. So we can go both ways here, and we have to. Then there was a war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. Who's waging war with the dragon? Michael and his angels. Now, how do they war? The dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. So what happened? And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now remember when Jesus said, when he sent out the 70, he said, behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. And then he says, in that same context, I believe it's in Luke 10, he says that I saw Satan fall from heaven like a flash of lightning. When Jesus sent out and commissioned those 70, there was a war initiated city to city as they were going out. Well, why would John, who knew about that, he was there, he saw it, why would he not bring that data or tie that data into this vision of future events? Because he was taken up into heaven to see future events. Why would he not take that and apply it to here? What he's talking about here has to do with something that I believe is going on now or is on the verge of being released. He says, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down. Where does Satan accuse the brethren? At the throne of God. What has he been doing? Accusing the brethren. But now he's been sent down. Where did the people go? They were taken to a place prepared by God. The woman. A special place. A safe place. Could it represent a rapture? It's not ruled out. Could it represent a special spot in the world? A hidden place? Could be. And it's there for 3.5 years. So while that's going on, the accuser comes down and he accuses the people of God day and night. And they